Hello, welcome back. Thank you for tuning in this week as I tell you about my travels in Ghana. And stay tuned at the end. You can see about what it's like being an African American and particularly what it's like being a mixed ethnicity African American in my travels to Ghana. So stay tuned. Hey, that's my job, y'all. No, seriously. Okay, so welcome back. Thank you for tuning in. So let's just get right into it. Basically, being African American and going to Ghana for the first time was my whole life. Honestly, it gave me the opportunity to connect to something that I didn't even really know that I was missing. And being from the diaspora, I've always felt like I was missing something or I was missing a big part of me. Not and really knowing, being African American and not knowing where I come from and not knowing what country that I come from or not having aunts or uncles or any cousins or anybody remaining in Africa, anywhere in Africa, the whole continent is kind of like a whole new frontier. And so going there was super fulfilling for me. Going during the year of return and on a bigger level, being called back to come to the continent and in particular Ghana gave me a little bit of a focus of a place to go to and have a little bit of an itinerary instead of just being there. You know what I mean? And not really knowing where to go or what to do with that and then trying to process at the same time. So I was really glad that I got to go through a program that had a whole itinerary where we could learn a number of different things. And having gone as a teacher, and remember, I told you a little bit about that in the previous posting, but you can learn more about how I traveled for free on a teacher's Fulbright in the last post. So going there and being a teacher, I had the opportunity to work with other teachers from the university level all the way down to the, pre-K level. And so it was really amazing having a structured program that I could go to and kind of have something to focus on so I could process in a number of different levels and not just be like, oh, I'm African American, here I am. So that was really amazing, and I really attribute a lot of my ability to process things because I had that. And so I would definitely suggest if people are wanting to go and travel, definitely have kind of like a program that you're going to go for, some kind of thing that will give you the opportunity to focus on something and be able to process like one step at a time. Coming for the year of return was something that, I felt this nostalgia about that I didn't even know what for. Like I felt this kind of closing of a circle. I felt like things were definitely challenging because I didn't necessarily know what I was going for at a certain point. But because I had the program, I could focus on something. But being there with the year of return, when we got there, was a little bit challenging too because it's like, what does that mean? So like in theoretical terms, it's the year of return, people are coming back, but like, what are we coming for? Is there a center? Was there a particular event? And what we found was not necessarily. Some of the people in my group were really interested in automatically looking into citizenship, and I was playing with the idea, but also thinking like, I've traveled to places before and I wouldn't just go there and be like, I want to be a citizen because I know what it takes. Previously I've worked with refugee and newcomer students coming to the US, and it's a lot. Like on a social level, on a cultural, political, economic, financial level, you have to do all those things before you can really commit to being a citizen with all its responsibilities therein. There definitely was a feeling of being connected going in the year of return and feeling like there was this whole diasporic connection that I had as an African American, as an African descendant, and knowing that there were things that we were connected on a certain level, even if it was not so much of a daily reality. What you got? What you got?
I got banku and crabs.
Nana, what you got?
I got banku and goat soup and light soup mixed with okra.
Is it good?
Very good, very good, very good. Hey.
And then I'll be real honest. couple of days and a couple of weeks set in, after some of the fatigue, after some of the romanticizing of being in a new place comes in, after some of the exotification, and then all of a sudden you're kind of like, okay, I've been here for like 2-3 weeks, and some of the real stuff, some of the real difficulties started hitting in. When I went to the door of return, or some of the dungeons, let's call it what it is. Come on, y'all. Like, I know that they call it Cape Castle and Elmina Castle, but if you look at what my ancestors went through, those were dungeons. And so I'm going to call it what it was, which was a dungeon. And so learning about that, learning about the reality of enslavement, and then seeing the door of no return was super challenging and gave me a feeling of the kind of the first wave of disconnection, because mostly on our tour, mostly all you saw were people from other places, people from the diaspora, which is to be expected. You know, it's kind of like, I'm from the Bay Area, and you go and see the touristy things once when you're young, and that's it. Like, you don't really see it again. When we left the door of no return, and mind you, this is like a super emotional happening, right? As soon as we walk outside, there's all these people just selling all these different things. And I mean, like, selling, like, relentlessly, as if it was outside on the street. So that was one of the first times that it was kind of challenging for me to look and see what is my actual identity being here, and what's the physical reality and the physical implication of that today. I come here and I'm totally an outsider that actually has to go to a museum, more like historical kind of thing, to even learn about the actual history. Whereas you have people who are locals who this is just ingrained in it so much so that they don't even really talk about it. It's just the daily reality. At that point, I also started thinking the fact that I have American citizenship, meaning that I have American dollars, is a different whole reality. And so thinking of what that means to be an American tourist, and more than being African American, because it's kind of like, what does that even mean? You're American because your passport, and you can leave, and you have the dollars, and you can, you know, if there's an emergency, a national emergency, you can be rescued or, you know, sought after by the American embassy and be flown out, or whatever the case. I don't know how that logistics of that go. So that was the beginning. That was probably a couple weeks in. And then we went and did an activity making batik, which is basically kind of like wax print that you make with different adinkra or different traditional symbols. When we went to go do that, I'll never forget it. I remember it was kind of like in like a local area, right? And there was a baby that was around, and she just kept on crying. She was probably like 10 months or maybe 11 months. She just kept on crying. She was crying for like an hour. So finally I was like, hey, man, what's up with the baby? Like, is she good? Like, what's up? And they were like, oh, she doesn't like white. And I'm like, oh, yeah, all of y'all, you better get out of here. She don't like white. Like, that's y'all. And then he goes, that's you too. And I'm like, excuse me? I'm not white. What are you talking about? I'm not white. And he goes, yeah, but you're fair. And I'm like, what do you... And then it just kind of him, and he's like, and plus, look at your hair. Right? Just like, y'all, I totally flash back to being raised and being like, oh, but you're really not Chinese. And then on the other side being like, oh, but you're really not black. And so I just totally had a flashback and was like, oh my God, like, even here? And yes, even here. So walking away, they start calling me Brownie. And Brownie is kind of like the equivalent, my understanding of the equivalent of being like a gringo or like a foreigner, like a white person. And so the way that I interpreted that is the fact that, yeah, I'm an outsider. I'm an outsider. As much as I want to say I'm African American and I'm a descendant and Pan-Africanism and all these different things that I definitely, you know, agree with, your actual family ties have been cut. So when I was talking about, oh, we're brothers, we're sisters, auntie, cousin, they're just like, girl, yeah, whatever, as long as you're gonna pay me, like, I'll be what you want me to be, you know? And that's not, and I'm just saying, like, that's not to make any assumptions about Ghanaians or any locals, but it's to say that what I realized is that no matter how nostalgic I feel about it, or no matter how romanticized the idea of Pan-Africanism or being an African American or being an African descendant is, like I said, the physical reality is the same way that I was with some white people, or the same way that I was with light-skinned Latinos, and they're learning about these things for the first time. So was I. So how can I say that I have any more of a connection with these strangers as myself being a huge stranger? The only thing is that I maybe look a little bit more relatable because I'm a little bit browner, but then also the fact that I'm mixed ethnicity Chinese American, I actually don't look that much more like a local. And so there's not that much more entrance or more connection that we can make on just the social level and a cultural level. There was a couple times that the lights went off in the whole country when I was in Ghana. Like the whole country. And it took me a minute to even fathom that and not make a ruckus or try to like reclama or like try to like create a revolt about it, because that was just a different physical reality. Being Chinese was a whole different thing too, because of what's happening there and the fact that a number of the Chinese are kind of like neo-colonizing in Africa and in Ghana. And so sitting there and just kind of having to be quiet, or feeling like it's probably best for me to be quiet, when they would be saying like, oh, the Chinese are doing this, the Chinese are doing that, they're so shady, they don't care about us, they're bringing their own workers, like they're super racist, this and that, and me just sitting there and being like, yeah, I don't really know what to say. Like, they're racist against me too, kind of, but then I share similar blood, so all I have to do is say that I'm you, and after a little bit of me being like, like I'm Chinese too, like my grandma's from here, like here's my credentials, then it's kind of all good. So it's a little bit of like a pass in a different way, because again, like Chinese people like in China and even here in the US see me and they're like, you're Chinese? Did you know you have a Chinese last name? I'm like, oh yeah, did you know, yeah, I know that. I suspected. So it was just really interesting being Chinese there, and then being kind of exotified, which is no different than what I have here also in the US or many of other countries that I've traveled to. But then also being like the colonizer and the colonized at a similar point. So it was just really interesting. So in the end, the whole concept, I didn't come to a resolution at all. So here I am talking about it. That this sense of feeling that I got from recognizing that as an African American, as a person of African descent, that I get to see the roots of where I come from, and I get to see an unaltered or less altered perspective of traditional food, indigenous African languages, culture, cultural ties, rites of passage, aunties being like, no, I'll beat you. And me having been raised with some of that too, but also feeling like it was kind of here and there, but neither here nor there, and getting to see that in full effect, seeing funeral rites, seeing birth rites, seeing or hearing about wedding and marriage rites, about child rearing practices, and learning about some of the daily realities of Ghanaian society gave me hope and gave me a feeling of groundedness and a foundation that as an African American I didn't really grow up having so much. So it's really interesting because there's these shifting layers of identity and belonging and otherness that I still haven't really reconciled, and I don't know if I ever will, as an African American who still doesn't know where my great grandparents on my African American side are from. So I want to know too if any of you have traveled as African Americans to the motherland, to Ghana, and especially in the year of return. What does that look like for you? So drop a comment, let me know what you think. Subscribe, let me know, and then look out for the next video, which I'm gonna talk about dating in Ghana, or I don't know if I call it dating, but definitely kind of like courting and kind of like love and romantic situations. Oh God. So definitely subscribe and look out for the next couple videos coming to you. All right, y'all. Ciao. Thank you for watching.